All right, so here is my 2015 FRS, and you saw the title of the video. It's got a turbo on it, and we're going to talk about all the little things that nobody really talks about when they're installing these, because there's a lot more to it than just bolting on the turbo, and digging through forums forever is kind of difficult. Some people don't want to share this information. So we'll pop the hood and check it out. All right, so setup's pretty straightforward. Got a JDL turbo kit, the best one on the market, if you ask me. Some of the other ones are still pretty good, but the HKS one is another one I see a lot of people running. And in my opinion, the turbo that comes with that is set up for a lot more than the stock motor. I think this is a better kit for the stock motor. If you're doing a built motor, then, well, you're working with a whole different setup. But, so here we got stock motor, Gerald 2860, JDL kit. Things that people don't tell you about. Underneath here, all the vacuum lines that are run underneath your manifold, they don't have any clamps on them. So when you introduce boost, it blows them all off, and then you have vacuum leaks. Now, you can take off the whole intake manifold, which isn't that big of a deal on this car, but you can also kind of fish them out with your hands, and then you'll see on the purge valve, which is part of the evap system, those are the most common ones that blow off. They are right here. I really can't show you on the camera, but you'll feel that there's a 10 mil bolt holding them on. You'll pop that 10 mil off, pull the valve out, put clamps on those lines. Those are the major ones that come off. Let's see what else we got. I am running a Mishimoto oil cooler, so when I installed this turbo kit, I had to delete my washer fluid reservoir, which is normally right here. I've never once sprayed washer fluid on this windshield, so it didn't bother me, but some people that might bother. Ideally, you would route this pipe for your intake up, and it would sit over here, and it wouldn't block your washer fluid reservoir. But if you have an oil cooler, and most of them run down this way, trying to fit the oil cooler lines and the intake right in this spot, you just don't have room for the washer fluid reservoir. It was fine with me to delete it, because, you know, get rid of a little weight, get rid of something I don't use, and it looks a bit cleaner. And to delete that, you basically just unplug it, unplug the lines, set it aside, and you're good to go. You're not going to notice. Now, normally you would have your blow-off valve, which is right in here. I'll see if I can show it to you. So I don't actually have one. I'm running a block-off plate. It's V-banded in here. That's the V-band clamp right there. And then normally that line would come out, run however you want to run it, and then tee in right here off of your booster. So there's a valve right here. When you're cutting this line, you need to make sure you put the tee after this valve, and then you would normally tee off to the blow-off valve from here. I can show you exactly what that looks like. So right here is the blow-off valve. This is the one that comes with the JDL turbo kit. It's a V-banded one, it doesn't bolt in. So normally this would sit right in here. Obviously you install it with the bumper off. It sits right about here on your piping for the intercooler. And then you run the line out the top of this, over to here, and then you would tee it in right here. So normally that T-fitting is not there. You'd have to cut this, put the T-fitting in, put your reference line on for the blow-off valve. Now, I decided not to run one. Yes, I know that makes more compressor surge, but that's the noise I enjoy. The car is at 8 pounds of boost, and it's on a Gerald ball bearing turbo. It's not gonna cause any problems. And if it for some reason does wear the turbo out 1 month sooner than it should, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it for the noise. Now, one thing you wanna make sure of if you're installing this or the block-off plate is that you have this O-ring on here. That O-ring is gonna keep it from leaking. Otherwise you'll have a boost leak. Now, the little block-off plate that I got, since JDL offers the V-banded one, you have to get a V-band block-off plate. A lot of cars, you can just get a little, basically a little plate of metal, has 2 holes in it, you put 2 screws through it, some RTV on there, and you're good to go. This one's a little different. Since it is V-banded, you have to buy this special clamp. It's, well, not the clamp, you have to buy the plate, and then you reuse the V-band clamp. And you can get that for like $19. I got it on eBay. The JDL kit does come with a Turbo Smart blow-off valve, and it comes with a Turbo Smart wastegate, which is going to be a bit harder for me to show you. Let's see, can we see it? You can see just the edge of it right here. So now the wastegate, that's another thing that a lot of people skip over when setting up. If you're familiar with turbo setups, then it's not a big deal to you, but if this is your first time installing one, you're gonna have a line that comes off of the wastegate, and it's gonna come right up here, if you can see it, on the turbo. So this line, zip tied on, it is really dark in there, it's hard to see. So there's a line zip tied onto that fitting that's going down to our wastegate. If that line pops off, your wastegate's not gonna open and you're just gonna keep boosting. And then that's how you go kaboom with that motor. So you wanna make sure that line is on. I did get the recirculating wastegate. There's one that dumps open atmosphere, and then there's also one they offer that dumps back into the downpipe. I got that one just for a bit of a cleaner noise, so I could hear a little more turbo intake noise and flutter, rather than just air shooting down at the ground. But what's next? We have our coolant lines and our oil lines. So there's a couple places you can get oil pickup for the turbo on these motors. The most common one is right here. There's a fitting already, well, there's not a fitting, there's a threads into the block with a cap there. You will unscrew the cap. This line's provided by JDL. Screw that in, screw this one into the top of the turbo, and you're good. Now the drain line is an AN fitting, which I might be able to show. Okay, you can kind of see it. So there's an AN line right here. That's gonna go straight down to the oil pan. And now the oil pan that they sell comes pre-welded with the bung in, you just bolt it right up. If you don't want to buy the bolt-in one, you can buy a bung that just welds in yourself, but I will say getting the oil pan off, it usually gets pretty bent, so it's hard to, you have to either straighten it back out or replace it. And welding in just takes more time. I'd rather pay the extra $100 or so to just get a pan that's already pre-welded, but if that's somewhere you want to save some money and you have a welder handy, you can definitely do so. Just be very careful when you put it back in and make sure it's not bent. Now the coolant lines, there's a couple places you can pick up coolant. It basically just runs in line with the rest of the coolant system, so you can really pick it up anywhere. The easiest place I've found is underneath the throttle body. Let's see if I can show them. Okay, you can kind of see these two coated lines right here. There's one there, and then another one on top of it right here. So normally there's a U-bend rubber pipe that goes right there, and coolant runs through it like a loop this way. So you basically unclamp the U-pipe, pull it off, run these two lines where that obviously connected before, and then clamp them onto your two turbo coolant fittings. Now these fittings don't come pre-installed, but they will be with the kit. So install those, clamp those, and you should be good to go. When I started my car for the first time after installing the kit, the only leak I had was one of these lines underneath the throttle body. And all I had to do was tighten the line. I just didn't get it tightened all the way, but it is kind of a hard spot to see a leak. So it ran for a couple minutes before I actually noticed. Luckily it was just coolant, not oil. There is other places you can run it. You can use some other lines behind towards the back of the engine, or anywhere else that there's a fitting you can pop these two onto. They do just run in line with the rest of the cooling system. It's not really a big deal where you get that from. I just found it was easiest and cleanest to grab it from that U-pipe underneath the throttle body. Now, the kit will also come with a new map sensor. I'm sorry, map sensor, not map sensor. The map sensor is right here. You'll have to install a new one, which will be probably a 3-bar or 4-bar. And now I can't get my cover back on. There we go. And that'll come with the turbo kit. It'll help the tuner out immensely. Another thing that is not included in the kit and is sometimes hard to find information about is this PCV valve. So this hose goes down to a PCV valve. You can see I have a clamp on it. The stock PCV valve is not made for boost. Obviously the car comes in A, it comes with a PCV valve that's made for an NA car. Now what everybody does is pick up the STI valve. STI valve you can get on Amazon. I think it was like $19. It's been a little bit since I ordered it, but I'll try to remember to leave a link to it. It's very easy to install. I think it's a 19mm socket. Can we see it any better from this side? Yeah, we definitely can. Okay, so this line goes down right there. Where that hose clamp is, there's a valve. You put a socket on it, loosen it up, put a little bit of thread sealer on it, put the new one in, and then put the line back on. The stock line is gonna fit a bit loose on the STI valve, so I recommend putting a clamp on it. It doesn't come with a clamp. For some reason, most of the lines in this car don't come with clamps, they just slip fit. Under boost, they like to blow off. So, normally, that line would run right up here into your intake. But since I have a catch can on here, the catch cans kind of run in line there. So I went with the Mishimoto catch can. It has one line obviously going down to that PCV valve, goes into the can and then back into the intake, just runs in line there. You can do a catch can or you can do an air oil separator. I know a lot of people run the BRZ air oil separator. That's a bit more complicated to set up, but if you're tracking the car, it might be necessary. So the main difference between the air oil separator and the catch can is that the air oil separator will separate the oil from the air and then return it back to the motor. The catch can does not return it back to the motor, so you have to empty it between oil changes, or depending on how fast it fills up. Ideally, it won't really fill up that fast. You'll just loosen this, the can will drop down, you'll dump it out. That's no big deal. Usually people check it once every oil change. This one seems to have pretty much none in it, which has been a good sign. But that was a simple, clean catch can. Can't really notice it, doesn't take up a lot of space. I like that one a lot. Turbo blanket. It does not come with a turbo blanket. I really recommend you get one because this thing gets very hot, obviously, and it's really close to a lot of lines and your fan. The only heat issue I really had so far was the turbo melting part of this fan bracket here. It kind of holds the fan motor in place. It did do some self-clearancing. It's kind of hard to see. You can see right around the screw here. That used to kind of touch it, and now it's done some self-clearancing and melted that away. If the car had brand new motor mounts or stiffer motor mounts, I think it would sit a bit more back like this, and then you wouldn't have that problem. Sorry if it sounds like I'm out of breath. It is extremely hot out here. Yeah, so if the motor sits a little bit further back with some stiffer motor mounts, you might have a little more clearance from the fan here. But turbo blanket, I think, is definitely a must. They're not that expensive, and it'll help keep everything a lot cooler, keeps a lot of that heat in. Right after ripping the car, I can literally put my fingers on the blanket and it's not too hot. If you're running a bigger turbo, because they do offer a couple different turbos with this kit, this is the 2860, it's one of the smaller ones. If you run a bigger one, you'll have to clearance this bracket right here that holds the fan motor. You will have to cut some of that away because the bigger turbos will hit it. And then you will also have a bit more of a clearance issue with your oil cooler. Another mod, highly, highly recommended if you're running a boosted car. Even on NA cars, it's recommended, but if you're running a boosted car, you really should get an oil cooler. Obviously, I can't show you the intercooler piping, but it is pretty simple. Intercooler sits right here. I have an oil, there's the Mishimoto oil cooler in front of it. The intercooler sits right behind it. As far as mounting it goes, there's one bracket that's basically an L bracket, goes straight up. That one doesn't fit that well. I'm not sure if I just didn't know how they were supposed to install it or if it was designed a bit weird, but it'll have one bolt that you bolt into the intercooler, and then it'll go up and you will bolt it into a hole that's on this core support here. You will have to drill that hole because I guess it sits a bit differently for each car. So you'll have to drill that hole yourself. And then there's also a plate in the bottom of the intercooler, which obviously I can't show you. It's behind the bumper. I really don't want to take the whole bumper off. But there's a plate that sits behind it flat, and you drill a hole in there, and there's some holes in the car that you can use to bolt it through. So that'll secure the intercooler. Even honestly, with no securing and just having the piping hooked up, it's pretty stiff. Obviously a bolt in there is good just to keep it in place. The intake, so we have this line here, which normally would go into your stock intake right here. So there's a couple ways you can route that. You can go underneath the compressor and everything, go over here this way. I ran it forward, you get an extension line, run it over here. I went underneath the intercooler piping and then right here into the intake. That just vents some of the air back into the intake from the engine. And then the intake, yes, typically if you don't have an oil cooler, it'll be rotated. It'll go out that way. So you'll be able to actually see the whole filter here. With the oil cooler lines, I found this was the best way. It seems to, get plenty of air from right here. I don't have fender liners in the car. I made some custom ones to block off this area. This area is getting tons of air. I might decide to change this filter out for something bigger in the future, but there really isn't a lot of room right here. A lot of the other kits shift the turbo to be more in the center of the car, but then you're in the way of this piece right here, and you'll have to run some low profile fans or something like that. I think the MA Performance and the HKS kit sit about right here. But yeah, so that's most of the engine bay for the JDL kit. Definitely highly recommend that. Now we'll go into the car and I'll show you some other stuff. We're gonna take this thing and go pick up some lunch. All right, now we're in the car. Car is running. No check engine lights or anything, thanks to a good tune. Now, you'll want to get something like this. This is a GJP vent pod. I really like this thing. I can get the AC flowing around it because it has these little cutouts in it. And it'll show me all kinds of different stuff, pretty much anything that the ECU can read. It just plugs right into the OBD2 port. Right down here, there's no wiring for it really. It took 2 seconds to install, no tools, nothing. You just pop this out, pop the vent in, put it back together, run your wire over to the OBD2 port. Now this one, let's see if I can get the camera in here. It's showing oil temp right now. Hold the button down, water temp, AFR, go the other way. I have intake air temp, boost pressure, which isn't super accurate. Obviously it's at idle right now, so it's pulling vacuum. You're gonna wanna get an actual boost gauge, which I do have. You'll also wanna get an oil pressure gauge. Those are the two things that the car can't read from factory on the ECU, and you're gonna wanna get your own gauges for it. There's plenty of kits where they go in right here. I have one that's gonna go up here on my pillar. I just haven't installed it. It's a bit of a hassle to get the oil pressure line, not oil pressure line, oil pressure sensor and the line for it routed. I just haven't had a chance yet, but they're gonna go right here in a new pillar, and you'll be able to see those on a little pod. But for now, just knowing my temperatures is awesome. I like to know the oil temp. I like knowing the intake air temp before I'm ripping on the car. You don't want to have a super high intake air temp and then start ripping on it. It's not very good for the car. So let's take this thing to get some lunch. One other thing I'd like to touch on, oil cooler, super important. 179 degree oil temp right now. It's, the dash says 92 degrees with the humidity and everything. It probably feels about like 100 degrees out here in Florida. It's hot as hell. And my oil temps are staying nice and cool. You don't want to get those too hot. It's really bad for your engine. Highly recommend oil cooler. All right, well, while I'm sitting here in the Starbucks drive-thru, I was gonna talk about the tuning for a second. Nice little shot of the car in the reflection. I got my car tuned by Counterspace Garage. I did a remote tune. You'll need an Ecutech to get tuned on these unless you have a standalone. Most people are going to run an Ecutech. Now I know a lot of people already have an OFT tablet, and that's going to load flash tunes for NA cars. Most of the tuners will not tune on those. I don't know of any that will. I'm sure there's some out there, but you're going to want to get an Ecutech. Ecutech dongle, super easy. I got the wireless one you could use with a phone or a laptop. You plug it into the OBD2 port, and that's how you load up your tunes. As far as tuning goes, you're going to want to get it pro tuned. You can get a dyno tune if you have a Subaru tuner local to you. I do not, so I got mine tuned by Counterspace Garage, and Zach at Counterspace Garage was absolutely amazing. That dude responded to everything so quick, helped me with anything that I needed. I had an issue with the Ecutech and it lost my license. He got that figured out for me super quick. Like, I'm in Florida, they're in California, so our business hours are a little bit different, but it worked out fine for me. They were awesome. They know these cars inside and out. They specialize in these things. Highly recommend them, and they're remote tuned, so you can get it tuned from wherever you are in the world. You don't have to be in California, where I believe they are. Counterspace Garage or CSG, they were absolutely amazing. They got this thing super dialed in. Drives like a factory car. I couldn't be happier with it. We got it done in about 4 revisions, I think it was. 3 or 4 revisions. I've had some people that they had to do a couple more revisions, usually different turbo setups, maybe different fueling, whatever, different things. Some cars take a little bit longer to dial in, but I could not be happier with the tune that they got for me. This thing drives absolutely perfect. All right, bag secured. Let's get this thing back to the house. I'll talk about the Ecutech, the open flash, and the actual kit that I ordered. All right, we are back inside. I've got the 2 tuning devices that most people use for these cars laid out right here. And let's go ahead and talk about the differences. This one's the OFT, or open flash tablet. They're pretty cheap. You get a bunch of different tunes online for free, flash them onto the car. Usually used for NA cars. I ran one of these for a very long time with just catless headers. I ran the Stage 2 Plus tune. Works really good if you're going to keep stock intake, just change exhaust stuff up. There's also a bunch of other tunes. You can go in and modify them. You can get other people to go in and modify them. But I don't know a lot of people running one of these with a boosted car. It's not usually as safe. A lot of pro tuners don't want to tune on one of these because I believe it's something to do with the encryption of the tune. Other people can just steal it. Something like that. I'm not a tuner. I don't know exactly how that process works, but they usually don't want to use the open flash tablet. But when you are using it, you'll end up downloading some software. You can change it on the computer, upload it back onto here, then flash it onto the car. Now for the EcuTech, this is going to work a little bit differently. You'll buy this dongle and you'll buy a license for it. The license is what let you actually tune the car with it. You get like, it works on like a point system. One tune takes X amount of points per car, and then you can tune that car as many times as you want. If you want to do another car, you have to get another license for it to tune that car. So you want to get this dongle and you want to get the license. A lot of tuners sell these. Counterspace Garage, who tuned my car, sells these. They sell the license as well. You get the license from a tuner. I got my license from Counterspace and I ordered this on Amazon. Also comes with a little USB drive that works as your key to open the software on your device. So with this, you'll basically hook it up to your phone or your laptop. You don't want to use a desktop with it because you need to plug it up to the car while you're data logging and while you're uploading the tune. So a desktop's not the best idea. I would do the laptop. I found that to be easiest. Some people use the phone too. There's different ones. There's a wired one, which you'll have to plug in a cable to it, and then there's a wireless one. I ran mine wired just for the reliability of it, but you can do it either way. So with this one, your tuner will send you a tune file. You'll put it on your computer, put it in the file, and then plug this into the car, plug this into the laptop, and then you will upload your tunes with this through the laptop that the tuner sends you. It'll flash them onto the car. You're good to go. You can unplug it. You don't need it to stay in there. Now this one, you can use this screen to monitor different data, sort of like that vent pod that I had in my car. You can mount this in your car, use it like a cob access port. It'll show you your like oil temperatures and other ECU readings like that. This one does draw power from your battery while the car is off if it's plugged in. So you're gonna wanna unplug it if you're gonna let the car sit for more than a day or so. You could also get an OBD port switch, but when you disconnect the power from it, it'll remove your settings for the different gauges that you had up on here. So every time you start the car, you'll have to select them again if you unplug it or turn it off. If you just leave it plugged in, it'll remember your stuff, but it will drain power. So if you leave the car for a couple days, it'll usually not start, and that's kind of a problem. So this one, I don't leave it plugged into the car. I just plug it in if I need to data log or upload a tune to it, and then use my GJP vent pod as some way to monitor things. So with this one, you can get the EcuTech app, leave this plugged in, and then stream data to your phone so that it will show you, like, you know, all the ECU readings, your oil temperature, your water temperature, your intake air temperatures, AFR, stuff like that. And there's an app that EcuTech makes for it. You can put it on your phone and mount your phone in there. If you have an Android head unit like I do, then you could download the app on the head unit. I had a little bit of trouble trying to find like the Bluetooth connection for this. But if you could figure it out, you could technically run all of your gauges on your head unit, which is actually pretty cool if you have an Android-based head unit. So next, I'm going to show you the exact kit that I spec'd out. It's from JDL, jdlautodesign.com. This is what I think is the best kit on the market. Base price, $42.99 as of right now. So there's a couple different turbos you can get. I got the 2860 RS. Manifold, unequal length or equal length, that's what's going to change your sound. That Subaru Rumble everybody likes is an unequal length or UEL header. Now this is one of the only turbo kits that I know that actually keeps an unequal length header. Most of them switch to an equal length, as I think it adds for some better top end power, but I like the sound and I don't really spend a lot of time at Redline with this car. It's a street car. It's not, it doesn't see the track except for like maybe once a year. So it's not really my main focus. So I went with unequal length. Now dump tube, you can vent it to atmosphere or recirculate it. Now this is the tube that comes off of your wastegate. So when it's letting out that excess air, it'll vent either straight to the ground basically. You'll get a bit more noise from that. Some people like it, some people don't like that noise. It's kind of up to you. I would look up some sound clips of vent to atmosphere dump tubes or recirculated. I personally chose the recirculated one. I thought it would give me a little bit more of a cleaner sound. I did kind of go for an OEM plus look to everything too, as we'll get to. I didn't do any red or anything like that. Everything's powder coated black and Cerakoted black. So I went with the recirculated. Now the outlet flange, I did 2.5 as that's what the rest of my exhaust is. If you want a bit more power, you'll go with the 3, but you'll need a 3-inch exhaust to go with it. So I go down to a 2.5, which is what the rest of my exhaust is. Now, here's what the kit looks like all together. and this is the black piping that I got. Up here it shows the red. Now, hot parts thermal coating. I did black. You can get bronze, tungsten, or titanium. They do charge a bit more if you want it coated. I do recommend getting it coated. It looks pretty nice. The thermal coating helps keep some heat in it. Let's see, there we go. Here's the titanium, bronze, tungsten, and black. I think the black looks the best, but you know, pick whichever one you want. Now, over here, I did black, intercooler, standard, there's only one option. Heat coating for Cerakote. Yes, this is for the intercooler piping. I did that on mine. You don't have to, but you know, it is a heat coating, it helps out. Now, the pipe color, you can pick black or red. I did black. Here is what the black one looks like, which you saw on my car. Here's what the red one looks like. I've seen this on some other cars. It does look good, just wasn't the style I was going for. Now, the pre-welded oil pan. Here's an important part. So you need obviously a return bung for your oil drain line. Now, if you get the pre-welded oil pan, you don't have to do any welding yourself, and you don't have to worry about bending your pan. You don't want to weld the pan on the car. You'll want to take the pan off of the car, put in the bung, tack it in, weld it all the way around, make sure it's sealed, make sure it doesn't leak. You know, nobody wants a leaking oil pan. But when you take your oil pan off of these cars, they're pretty flimsy. They like to bend. They're made of aluminum. They're not the strongest thing ever. So when you take it off, you usually have to pry it off with the pry tool, and it bends. Now you can bend it back straight. You can make it straight again so that it mounts up nicer. But it was a lot easier to me just to get the pre-welded pan. Only $170 more. Yes, it's $170, but in the grand scheme of this kit, it's not that much more. Now the 3-bar map sensor, you're gonna wanna do that. It helps your tuner tune the car. It's gonna be a lot better than the stock one for tuning, especially if you're running higher boost, like on 8 pounds, it's not that big of a deal. The 3-bar is fine. I believe you used to be able to get a 4-bar. It seems like they might've changed the offering on the kit, but 3-bar will cover most cars. Now, the low pro fan shroud is not something I got. It is something I recommend getting if you're gonna do one of the bigger turbos, if you're not gonna do the 2860. If you're gonna do one of these like 3076, they're a bit bigger and they do get in the way. So the low pro fan shroud is actually a pretty good idea. I didn't end up getting one of those, but it would definitely be helpful. And as you saw on mine, I melted a bit of the fan shroud. So you probably won't have that problem with a low pro one. Fuel injectors. I did not get any injectors. I'm not running E85 and I am only on 8 pounds of boost at about 280 to 300 horsepower wheel. The car hasn't been actually dynoed, but based on what other kits make, I assume it's going to be something like that. It should be about 300, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on the weather outside. It's pretty hot down here, so maybe a little bit less. Anyways, so for 93 octane or 91 octane, 8 pounds of boost, around 300 horsepower, you're not going to need injectors. It does help. You know, it's a bit safer to have more injector, but the stock ones are fine if you're running that power level. If you are going to go with a bigger turbo, more boost, or E85, you're going to want to get injectors. The stock fuel pump is actually good for quite a bit of power, but if you're running a lot of power, they do offer a Walbro pump. But I went ahead and got no pump, no fuel injectors, running stock for now. I'll probably do E85 in the future and upgrade those. So that's it for the kit. With all those options, this is all the options I have on mine. It's $5,134, which is a lot of money, but that's honestly what about most other forced induction kits for this car come out to be. Even the supercharger ones, they're a little bit less or a little bit more depending on the kit, but most forced induction kits are about this much. Now, there is plenty of other things to go with this, like some other things I already talked about, STI valve, just assorted clamps and stuff. You're going to want a clutch, an oil cooler, something to monitor your temperatures if you're not going to use one of the tuning devices to monitor that. And I'll probably make a full video in the future about all of the supporting mods that I did and how much those cost. Most people end up being about $10,000 deep into this by the time they've boosted one of these cars. You can do it cheaper if you skimp out on some of the other parts, or maybe go with cheaper stuff, or even fab some stuff yourself. But most people end up being close to $10,000 in. If you're going for higher power or you don't have a stock motor, then you end up being more, of course. But that's about it for the kit. This is exactly what I ordered. This is 2023. This is their V2.1 kit, as it says right here. They did have some different ones. They're mostly the same. I think they changed up the turbos that were offered and changed up the blow-off valve. I know they used to use precision turbos on some of the older ones, and they didn't have coolant lines in them. I know the Gerald ones have coolant lines run to them. I think the older ones were just oil. So that's all for the kit. It's all for the tuning process. Again, there's more instructions online of how to use each of these two things. This one's mostly for NA applications. This one's going to be for boosted and NA cars. I know people that have tuned NA cars on this with Pro Tunes. Works very well for that too. This, you're not going to want to use this for a boosted car. That pretty much covers all the little things that I could think of, like stuff that people don't normally talk about in their install videos. You know, they're just bolting on turbos, bolting on manifolds, whatever. They don't talk about where all the hoses are routed, all the PCV pipe, or not PCV pipe, PCV valves, stuff like that, and the tuning process. So that pretty much covers everything I could think of. If there's stuff I missed or something else you want me to talk about, let me know, leave a comment. If there's anything you want to add to it, if you have a boosted car, leave a comment. Maybe you don't have a boosted car and you still have something that I messed up or that I should do differently or something like that. Leave me a comment. If you think I'm gonna blow up the turbo because I took off the blow-off valve, let me know. But I think it should all be okay. Yeah, if you want to see more about this car and maybe do a full walk around on it, then we can do that in the future. But that's pretty much it. I want to do some more driving videos with it, do a little bit more of a review with the turbo kit of the driving on it. I know I took like one clip earlier, but I don't have a very good setup for driving videos. I don't want to crash the car. I wanted my hands on the wheel and the shifter and everything, so I didn't do much of that, but maybe I will in the future. And then I'm also probably going to do a video about all the supporting mods. There's plenty of stuff you need to do to this to get it ready to be turbocharged, and even afterwards. So I plan on doing another video like that in the future. Let me know if you guys want to see that, and have a good one. I forgot to mention, I'm editing this video right now, but if you want to follow me on Instagram and message me if you have any questions about anything, or just see the rest of the car, you can follow me right here, Henry_Nugent, Newgent. So, see you guys.